first scream of chaos was not a warning. It was the end of the world, as it had been. When the polar gates collapsed, reality itself began to tear apart. The sky fractured with unnatural light, and the winds of magic, unceremonious, became violent, unstable, uncontrollable. From those broken gateways, something ancient entered the world. Not an army, not an invasion, a corruption. Demons pouring into existence like a disease given form. Creatures born not of flesh, but of emotion, rage, despair, disease, decay. They did not watch information. They did not follow rules. They consumed. The entire civilization vanished without a trace. Lands twisted into grotesque reflection of what they once were. Forests rot, ocean churned with unnatural life. The world was no longer whole, and for the first time since their creation, the High Elves were powerless. Ulthuan, almost a sanctuary of perfect balance, became a beacon into darkness. Its immense magical presence, once a source of harmony, now drew the gaze of chaos. Like a flame in endless night, it could not be ignored. The island was no longer safe, it was inevitable. The Asur resist. Mage gathered in a great conclaves, weaving a spell vast enough to reshape the winds of themselves. Dragons were awakened from ancient slumber. Armies were formed, not from ambition, but necessity. But it was not enough. For every demon banished, more took its place. For every victory, the cost grew higher. The High Elves had been created to preserve balance, not to survive extinction. And so, slowly, they began to lose. It was in this age, when hope had begun to fade, that one name rose above all others: Aenarion. He was not the greatest of the elves, not the most learned, not the most powerful, but he was the one who did not break. Aenarion was born into a world already falling apart. He did not remember peace as something real, only as something spoken of a memory that belonged to others. What he knew was loss. He saw cities consumed by fire that did not burn, but erased. He saw warriors driven mad by whispers they could not silence. He saw dragons fall, creatures own thought eternal, destroyed by things that should not exist. And more than anything, he saw that no one had an answer. The greatest mage debate, the wisest hesitate, the strongest fell. So Aenarion chose something different. He hacked, not because he believed he could win, but because doing nothing meant the end of everything. He gathered what remained. Warriors unprepared for such horrors. Mages stretched beyond their limits. Ancient allies, bound not by loyalty, but by desperation. And he led them into war. At first, he fought as an elf, with discipline, with control, with purpose. But chaos not ill discipline. It does not tire, it does not fear, it does not stop. And slowly, something inside him began to change. Every battle demanded more strength, more violence, more sacrifice, and each time Aenarion gave it, until the line between who he was and what he needed to become began to disappear. In a moment that would never be forgotten, the demonic horde struck not just a kingdom, but at his very soul. Astarielle, the Everqueen, that living embodiment of Ulthuan as grace and purity, was slain. Not in glory, not in battle worthy of her name, but torn apart by the very forces that sought to make a world. And his children, scattered, lost to the chaos of war, to a world that was no longer safe even for the blood of kings. In that moment, something inside Aenarion did not break. It hardened. Grief became fury, love became something colder, sharper. The war was no longer about survival, it became personal, and whatever it still was, whatever restraint remained, began to fade. That was the moment he walked toward the Shrine of Khaine. Deep within that cursed place, the air itself felt heavy, as it remembered every death that had ever occurred with this wall. At its center stood the blade, the Sword of Khaine. It did not shine, it did not call, it simply waited. Aenarion knew what it was. Every elf did. A weapon that was not a weapon, but a curse. Power beyond measure at the cost of everything that made you who you are. He understood completely, and still he reached for it. This is the moment everything changed. Not because Aenarion was corrupt, but because he chose to be. He chose victory over purity, survival over identity. And in doing so, he became something that High Elves were never meant to be. The transformation was immediate. The hesitation vanished. The restraint disappeared. What remained was something cooler, more efficient, more dangerous. Aenarion no longer fought chaos. He matched it. Demons fell before him, numbers beyond counting. Entire hosts shattered at his presence. The tide of destruction, for the first time, began to recede. It was unstoppable. It was salvation. But salvation has a cost. With every battle, the sword fat. With every life taken, its soul depends. Aenarion was not wielding the blade. The blade was shaping him. Those closest to him began to see it. The silence between battles, the distance in his gaze, the weight he carried, alone. He was saving the world, but he was losing himself, and still, they need him. With only his dragon, Dragnir, at his side, and the cursed Sword of Khaine in his hand, the first Phoenix King marched against the greatest champions of the Dark Gods. He did not face mere demons. He faced the 4 Greater Daemons of Chaos. The Lord of Change of Things, Master of Sorcery and Fate itself, fell first, his head split in two by a single strike of the Sword of Khaine. Then came the Keeper of Secret of Slaanesh, bearer of forbidden desires and eternal madness. Its dark power shattered Aenarion's ribs. Yet the elf continued forward, driving the Sword of Khaine through the demon's chest until it dissolved into nothingness. The great and unclean one of Nargol sought to drown the world in decay and pestilence, but the purifying flames of Idrignir burned away the demon's corrupt flesh, allowing Aenarion to strike it down. And finally came the Bloodthirster of Khorne, the living incarnation of war itself. Their battle was so catastrophic that Idrignir was mortally wounded and Aenarion's arm was shattered. But by then, Aenarion was no longer merely an elf. He had become wrath, despair, and unbreakable will made flesh. With one final devastating blow, the Sword of Khaine cleaved the Greater Demon in half. And so, Aenarion saved the world. But within that victory, he lost himself forever. This is the true tragedy of Aenarion. Not that it fell, but that he had to. Without him, the world would have ended. Because of him, something within the elves was lost forever. When the world finally turned, when chaos was pushed back, and the world was given a fragile chance to endure, Aenarion stood victorious. But he was no longer the same. He would become the first Phoenix King, a ruler forged not in peace, but in fire, blood and sacrifice. And his legacy would not be glory, but a warning that even the greatest can break, that even the purest can fall, and that sometimes, to save the world, you must become the very things you were created to resist.